You know how people always warn you about the dark web? How it's the underbelly of the internet, where all the sick and twisted minds congregate? Yeah, I thought that was just fear-mongering. Something out of a horror movie. I mean, how bad could it really be? It's just a bunch of hackers, right? Maybe some illegal stuff if you dig deep enough, but nothing you couldn't avoid if you were careful. I was wrong. It all started when I got into crypto. You see, I'm not a tech genius or anything, just an average guy trying to make a quick buck. The hype around Bitcoin was at an all-time high, and I figured, why not? But, like an idiot, I decided I'd get a better deal if I bought some coins off the dark web. I was trying to avoid the fees on the usual exchanges, maybe even score a bit of that mysterious privacy coin people were talking about. I thought I was being smart. So I did some digging, found a marketplace that seemed legit, well, as legit as a site on the dark web can be. The reviews were solid, the vendors had good ratings, and everything looked professional. It was almost comforting, like buying from an underground Amazon. I even felt a little thrill navigating through the shadows of the internet, like I was part of some elite club. But here's the thing about the dark web. Everything is a lie. I found a vendor selling Bitcoin at a rate that was too good to be true. I should have known better. I should have walked away. But greed got the best of me. I messaged the guy, a user named CryptGod, and asked him about the transaction process. He replied almost immediately, like he was waiting for someone to take the bait. "Easy," he said. "Send me the cash through an anonymous transfer service, and I'll send you the coins within an hour." It seemed simple enough. He even threw in some extra perks, like advice on where to store the coins securely. He was friendly, polite, and professional. Everything you wouldn't expect from a criminal. I figured, why not? It's just another faceless transaction in the world of crypto, right? So, I sent him the money. An hour passed, then two. I started to get nervous, refreshing my wallet every few minutes, hoping to see the coins drop in. But nothing happened. I messaged him again, asking what was up. No reply. Another hour went by, and my heart started to race. I was pissed, thinking I'd been scammed, but it was more than that. It was the sinking feeling in my gut that something was really, really wrong. It wasn't until that night when I was about to go to bed that I got a reply. It wasn't from CryptGod, though. The message came from a different username, one I didn't recognize. "Enjoy the gift," it said. I froze. What the hell was that supposed to mean? I didn't even have time to process it before my phone started buzzing. Calls, texts, emails, they all started flooding in at once. It was like my phone had come alive, vibrating non-stop, the screen lighting up with notifications. I grabbed it, trying to make sense of what was happening. But the more I looked, the more my stomach churned. The calls were coming from random numbers, some with area codes I didn't recognize, others from what looked like international numbers. The texts were gibberish, strings of random characters that made no sense. And the emails, oh God, the emails. They were full of images. At first, I couldn't even tell what I was looking at. They were grainy, low-res pictures. But as I scrolled through them, a pattern started to emerge. They were photos of people, men, women, children. All of them bound, gagged, and terrified. Some were bruised and bloodied. Others were just staring into the camera with hollow eyes, like they knew what was coming. I wanted to throw up. I didn't sign up for this. I didn't want to see this. I tried to delete the emails, but more just kept coming, each one worse than the last. The images got clearer, more detailed, until I could make out every cut, every tear in their skin. It was like someone was showing me their collection of trophies, and they wanted me to see every last one. Then came the videos. I remember the first one I opened. It was a short clip, maybe 10 seconds long. It showed a man, tied to a chair in a dimly lit room. He was sobbing, begging for his life in a language I didn't understand. And then, without warning, someone off-screen slit his throat. The sound of the blade cutting through flesh, the gurgling of his last breath. It was so real, so visceral. I could almost feel the warmth of the blood splattering on the screen. I dropped my phone. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything to get away from what I'd just seen. But I was paralyzed. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all. Why was this happening? Who was sending me this? And then, it hit me. Enjoy the gift. That bastard CryptGod wasn't selling me Bitcoin. He was selling me something else, something far more twisted. And now, I was in it. deep. I tried to shut everything down, to power off my phone, but it was too late. The messages kept coming, the videos, the images, they wouldn't stop. It was like my phone was possessed, a portal to some kind of hell that I couldn't close. I started hearing things, noises in my apartment, like someone was moving around just out of sight. I could feel eyes on me, watching, waiting. Every shadow seemed to stretch and grow, twisting into grotesque shapes that made my skin crawl. I didn't feel safe in my own home anymore. I didn't feel safe anywhere. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those faces, those eyes, staring at me, accusing me. The sounds of their suffering echoed in my head, a constant reminder of what I'd done. By morning, I was a wreck. I hadn't eaten, hadn't showered, hadn't even left my bed. I was too afraid to move, too afraid to do anything but stare at my phone, waiting for the next wave of horror to hit. And then it did. A new message, this time from the original account, Crypt God. I hesitated before opening it, but I had to know. I had to understand what was happening. Payment received, it read. We'll be in touch. I don't know what scared me more, the fact that he was still out there watching me, or the implication that this wasn't over. Far from it. This was just the beginning. That day, I decided to go to the police. I couldn't handle this on my own. I needed help. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't going insane. But when I got to the station, I realized how futile it all was. How do you explain to someone that you bought crypto on the dark web and now you're being haunted by a psychopath? They wouldn't believe me. Hell, I barely believed it myself. But I tried anyway. I showed them the messages, the emails, the videos. I expected them to recoil in horror, to take me seriously. Instead, they looked at me like I was the crazy one. They took my statement, nodded along, but I could see it in their eyes. They thought I was just another paranoid idiot who'd gone too deep into the wrong parts of the internet. They didn't even keep my phone. They just told me to be more careful online and sent me on my way. I was on my own. When I got home, I sat in the middle of my living room, staring at the blank walls. I was trapped, boxed in by my own stupidity. I kept expecting something to happen. A knock on the door, a shadow passing by the window, but the hours ticked by and nothing did. But that was the worst part. The waiting, the not knowing. I tried to go back to my normal routine, but it was impossible. Every time I looked at my phone, I half expected it to light up with another message from that sick bastard. Every time I went outside, I felt like someone was watching me, waiting to strike. I couldn't escape the feeling that this wasn't over, that something was still coming for me. And then, late one night, it did. I was lying in bed, trying to sleep, when I heard it. A soft tapping at the window. My heart stopped. I wanted to believe it was just the wind, maybe a tree branch brushing against the glass, but deep down, I knew better. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to see what was out there, but I had to. I had to know. So I got up, slowly, quietly, and crept toward the window. The tapping continued, soft but insistent, like someone was trying to get my attention. My hands were shaking as I reached for the curtain, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I pulled the curtain back, just a little, just enough to see, and there it was. A face, pressed against the glass, staring at me with cold, dead eyes. It was a man, or what was left of him. His skin was pale and clammy, his mouth twisted into a grotesque grin, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too long, and stained a sickly yellow. His eyes, oh God, his eyes, were hollow black pits that seemed to absorb the light around them, pulling me into their void. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I was rooted to the spot, my heart pounding in my chest as those dead eyes locked onto mine. There was something wrong about the way he looked at me, something not quite human, as if he were seeing straight through me, into my very soul. Then, slowly, he lifted a hand, his fingers long and skeletal, the nails cracked and yellowed. He pressed it against the glass, dragging it down with a sound that sent a shiver through my entire body. The glass smeared with a dark, oily substance as his hand moved, leaving behind a trail of filth. And then he smiled, an awful, knowing smile that made my blood run cold. The corners of his mouth stretched impossibly wide, revealing more of those hideous, sharp teeth, and I felt a wave of nausea rise up in my throat. Suddenly, he began to tap again, harder this time, more insistent. The sound echoed in the silence of my room, each tap sending a jolt of terror through me. My instinct screamed at me to do something, anything. But I was frozen in place, unable to tear my gaze away from that horrific grin. Then, as abruptly as it had started, the tapping stopped. The man's face remained pressed against the glass for a moment longer, his eyes never leaving mine. I could feel the darkness emanating from him, seeping into the room, into me, filling every corner with an oppressive, suffocating presence. And then, just as quickly as he had appeared, he was gone. I blinked, and the window was empty. The only evidence of his presence was the greasy smear on the glass, a dark stain that seemed to writhe and pulse in the dim light. My heart was still pounding, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps as I tried to process what had just happened. Had I imagined it? Was my mind finally breaking under the strain of everything that had been happening? But no, this was real. I knew it was real. The oily smear on the glass, the lingering scent of decay in the air. It was all too real. I stumbled back from the window, my legs shaking, and collapsed onto the bed. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen, but nothing made sense anymore. Who was that man? What did he want? And why was this happening to me? I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, his twisted grin, those dead black eyes staring back at me. The fear was overwhelming. A constant gnawing presence that wouldn't let me rest, wouldn't let me escape. By morning, I was a wreck. My nerves were shot, my body aching from the tension. But I knew I couldn't stay in that house any longer. Whatever was happening, it was escalating, and I needed to get out before it was too late. But as I gathered my things, my phone buzzed again, a single ominous notification lighting up the screen. A new message from Crypt God. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest as I reached for the phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it, but I managed to steady myself long enough to open the message. It was short, just 2 words. We're here. The room seemed to spin around me, my vision blurring as the implications of those words sank in. I stumbled toward the front door, my mind racing, every instinct screaming at me to run, to get as far away as possible. But when I opened the door, my heart stopped. They were there, standing in the driveway, waiting for me. A group of them, all with the same hollow eyes, the same twisted smiles, their bodies gaunt and sickly, like something pulled out of the grave. And at the front, the man from the window, his grin wider than ever, his eyes boring into mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I was trapped. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. They had found me, and there was no escape. The last thing I saw before everything went black was his face, that terrible, inhuman grin filling my vision, those dead black eyes pulling me into the darkness. And then, nothing. I couldn't breathe. The face staring back at me through the glass was more corpse than human, like something dragged out of a grave. His skin was a sickly gray, stretched tight over sharp cheekbones, with patches missing as if it had been gnawed away. But it was the eyes that got me. Those hollow, lifeless eyes, sunk deep into his skull, yet somehow still locked onto mine with a terrifying intensity. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was frozen in place. My brain was screaming at me to move, to do something, but my body refused to obey. All I could do was stand there, staring at this thing, as it slowly raised a hand, dragging long, skeletal fingers down the glass, leaving behind a trail of something dark and oily. And then it smiled. It was the most horrifying thing I've ever seen. The way its lips pulled back, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too long, and stained with something dark. Blood, maybe? I didn't want to think about it. That smile was meant for me, and it was full of malice, like it knew exactly what it was doing, like it was enjoying the fear that radiated off me in waves. Finally, my instincts kicked in. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet and landing hard on the floor. The impact jolted me back to reality, and I scrambled away from the window, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. But the face didn't go away. It stayed there, pressed against the glass, watching me with that twisted grin. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my phone and called the police. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it, but I managed to punch in the number. The ringing felt like it went on forever before someone finally picked up. 911, what's your emergency? My voice came out in a choked whisper. Someone's outside my window. I don't know what to do. Please, you have to help me. Sir, remain calm. Can you describe the person? Are they trying to break in? I glanced back at the window, but the face was gone. The only thing left was a smear of that dark, oily substance, like a stain on reality itself. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Was it even real? Or was I losing it completely? They were here, right outside, I stammered, my eyes darting around the room. They looked dead, like a corpse. I don't know what's happening. Please just send someone. The dispatcher's voice was calm, too calm. We'll send a unit to your location, sir. Stay on the line with me, okay? Is there anyone else in the house with you? No, I'm alone, I muttered, trying to steady my breathing. I wanted to tell her everything, to explain what I'd been going through. But how could I? How could I make her understand that this wasn't just a break-in, that it was something far worse? I heard a rustling noise behind me and spun around, my heart lurching into my throat. But there was nothing there. Just the empty room, lit by the harsh glow of my phone. The shadows seemed to shift and writhe in the corners, playing tricks on my mind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that I wasn't alone. I was losing it. I had to be. Sir, are you still there? The dispatcher asked, her voice cutting through the fog of my thoughts. Yeah, I'm here, I whispered. But my attention was still on the room around me, on the growing sense of dread that clung to the air like a thick, suffocating blanket. Minutes felt like hours as I waited for the police to arrive. I didn't dare go back to the window, didn't dare look outside. What if it was still there, waiting for me? What if it was inside the house now, lurking just out of sight? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, and I clutched the phone tighter, as if it were some kind of lifeline. Finally, I heard the sound of sirens in the distance. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. As the blue and red lights flashed outside, I realized something horrifying. What if they couldn't find anything? What if this thing, whatever it was gone before they got here? Would they even believe me? The doorbell rang, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. I ran to the door, yanking it open, and was greeted by two uniformed officers. They looked at me with a mix of concern and skepticism, like they weren't sure if I was a victim or just some guy off his meds. Sir, we got a call about an intruder? One of them asked, his hand resting on the butt of his gun. Yeah, he was right outside my window, I said, my voice trembling. He looked dead. Like a zombie or something. The officers exchanged a glance, and I could tell they weren't taking me seriously. But they stepped inside, scanning the room with their flashlights, looking for any signs of forced entry or a struggle. Where did you see him? The other officer asked, his tone more skeptical now. I pointed to the window, still shaking. Right there. He was pressed up against the glass. They moved to the window, inspecting the smudge on the glass. One of them sniffed it, then wiped it with a gloved hand. It's just grease, he said, sounding almost disappointed. Probably a prank, or maybe a smudge from someone leaning against the glass. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about? I echoed, my voice rising. I saw him. He was right there, staring at me. The officer sighed, clearly trying to be patient. Look, we'll take a quick look around the property, but it sounds like someone might be messing with you. Have you had any issues with neighbors or anyone else recently? I wanted to scream at them, to make them understand that this wasn't a prank, but I could see it in their eyes. They didn't believe me. To them, I was just some paranoid nutjob who'd watched too many horror movies, so I nodded, swallowing my frustration, and let them do their search. They walked around the house, checked the yard, even shone their flashlights into the bushes, but they didn't find anything. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing. Everything looks clear, one of them said when they returned. If you have any more issues, don't hesitate to call us. But for now, I'd suggest getting some rest. Stress can do weird things to your mind. I wanted to argue, to make them understand that I wasn't just seeing things, but what was the point? They weren't going to listen. So I just nodded again, thanked them for their time, and watched as they drove away, leaving me alone in the dark. As soon as they were gone, the silence in the house became unbearable. Every creak, Every groan of the old wood felt like a scream. I didn't want to stay there. I couldn't. So I grabbed my keys, threw on a jacket, and bolted out the door. I didn't know where I was going, just that I needed to get away, to be around people, to feel safe. I ended up at an all-night diner on the edge of town, the kind of place where the coffee is always burnt, and the waitresses look like they've seen it all. I sat in a booth by the window, staring blankly at the menu. But I wasn't hungry. I just needed to be somewhere that wasn't my house, somewhere that felt normal. The waitress came by, a tired-looking woman in her late 40s with bags under her eyes and a cigarette tucked behind her ear. She took one look at me and frowned. "You look like you've seen a ghost, hun. Coffee?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She poured me a cup and walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts. As I sat there, the events of the night kept replaying in my mind. The face at the window, the greasy smear, the dismissive attitude of the cops. It didn't make any sense. How could something like that just vanish? How could they not find anything? And then a new thought crept into my mind, one that sent a chill down my spine. What if it wasn't alone? What if there were more of them, out there, watching, waiting? The idea made me nauseous, and I suddenly felt very exposed, sitting by the window. I moved to a booth further back, away from the glass, where I could see the door and the rest of the diner. I tried to calm myself down, to convince myself that it was just some sick joke, but the fear wouldn't go away. The waitress came back, topping off my coffee, and gave me a curious look. "Everything okay, hun?" "Yeah, just rough night," I muttered, staring into the dark liquid. "You ever get the feeling like you're being watched?" She paused, her expression softening. "Sometimes. But this late at night, it's usually just the shadows playing tricks. Don't let it get to you." I nodded, trying to take her words to heart, but the gnawing feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. I sat there for hours, nursing my coffee, watching as the few late-night patrons came and went. The waitress would check on me every now and then, but she didn't push. She knew better than to ask too many questions. When dawn finally broke, I paid my bill and left, feeling more exhausted than ever. The drive back to my house was a blur, and by the time I pulled into the driveway, I was running on fumes. I didn't want to go back inside, but I couldn't stay in my car forever. So I forced myself to get out, one heavy step at a time, and made my way to the front door. As I fumbled with my keys, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, a small, dark package sitting on my doorstep. It hadn't been there when I left. My heart skipped a beat. I knew, deep down, that I shouldn't touch it, that I should just walk away. But curiosity got the best of me. With trembling hands, I picked it up and carried it inside, placing it on the kitchen table. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, with no markings or labels, and tied with a thin piece of twine. My hands were shaking as I untied the knot and peeled back the paper. Inside was a small wooden box, intricately carved with strange symbols that I didn't recognize. It was old, the wood worn and cracked in places, and it smelled faintly of something rotten. I hesitated for a moment, my instincts screaming at me to stop, to throw it away, to burn it. But I couldn't. I had to know. I opened the box. Inside was a small glass vial filled with a thick, dark liquid. It looked like blood, but it was too dark, too viscous. There was a note, too, folded neatly and placed under the vial. I picked it up, my hands trembling, and unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant, almost old-fashioned, but the words sent a chill down my spine. A taste of things to come. Payment in full. I dropped the note, my heart racing. This was no prank. This was a warning, a promise of something far worse than I could have imagined. I stared at the vial, feeling a sickening dread wash over me. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that whatever had started with that Bitcoin transaction was far from over. It was just beginning. And whatever it was coming for me. As I sat there, staring at the box, a single thought kept running through my mind, over and over again. I should have never bought crypto from someone on the dark web. I didn't know it then, but that decision would cost me more than I could ever have imagined. It would cost me my soul. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face at the window, the twisted smile, the dead eyes. But even more than that, the image of the vial haunted me, the dark, viscous liquid that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. It was still sitting on my kitchen table, the wooden box next to it, both of them tainted with an evil I couldn't comprehend. I wanted to throw it away, to smash the vial and burn the box, but something held me back. It wasn't curiosity, not anymore. It was fear. The fear that doing so would make things worse, that destroying the vial would somehow unleash whatever was inside. So, I left it there, untouched, and retreated to my bedroom, locking the door behind me as if that would keep the darkness at bay. I don't know when I finally passed out, but when I woke up, it was to the sound of my phone ringing. The sunlight was streaming through the blinds, a harsh reminder that life was still going on outside my nightmare. I reached for my phone, my heart pounding as I saw the caller ID. Unknown number. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something compelled me to answer. Maybe it was the lingering dread, the need for some kind of resolution, or maybe I just wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't going crazy. "Hello?" I said, my voice hoarse. There was a pause on the other end, just long enough to make my skin crawl, and then a voice spoke. A voice so cold, so devoid of emotion, that it sent a shiver down my spine. "You've been chosen." I felt my stomach drop. "Who is this?" Another pause, and then the voice continued as if I hadn't spoken. "You were warned. Now you must pay the price." My throat went dry. "What do you want from me?" There was no answer, just the sound of heavy breathing, like the person on the other end was savoring my fear. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the call ended. The line went dead, leaving me holding the phone with trembling hands. I sat there, staring at the screen, willing it to ring again, to give me some clue as to what the hell was going on. But it didn't. The room was silent, the air thick with tension, and all I could do was sit there, my mind racing with possibilities. None of them good. Eventually, I forced myself to move. I needed to get out of the house, to clear my head, to put some distance between myself and whatever was happening. I grabbed my keys, threw on a jacket, and headed for the door. But as I reached for the handle, I froze. There was a note, taped to the door. It hadn't been there the night before. I was sure of that. I stared at it, my heart pounding in my chest, before finally reaching out to peel it off. The paper was rough, almost like parchment, and the writing was the same elegant script as the note in the box. I unfolded it, my hands shaking, and read the words aloud. "Run all you want. It won't change your fate." I nearly dropped the note. My first instinct was to get out, to run as far away as possible. But those words, those terrifying words, stopped me in my tracks. What was the point? They were right. Wherever I went, whatever I did, I couldn't escape this. I had opened a door, and now there was no going back. But I couldn't stay there either. I couldn't just sit around and wait for whatever was coming. So, I left the house, leaving the note crumpled on the floor, and drove aimlessly through town, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. My mind was a blur of fear and confusion. The events of the past few days playing on a loop, growing more twisted and surreal with each passing moment. The dark web transaction, the face at the window, the package, the phone call. It all felt like some kind of sick joke, a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I ended up at a bar on the outskirts of town, a seedy dive where the regulars wouldn't look twice at a guy drowning in his own misery. I needed a drink, something strong to take the edge off, to numb the fear gnawing at my insides. The bar was dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke. I sat at the far end of the counter, away from the few other patrons, and ordered a whiskey, downing it in one go before ordering another. The bartender didn't ask any questions, didn't even make eye contact, just poured the drinks and moved on. As I sat there, staring into my glass, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I glanced around, but no one seemed to be paying me any attention. Still, the feeling persisted, a heavy weight pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I downed the second drink, hoping it would help, but it only made things worse. The room seemed to spin, the shadows on the walls growing darker, more menacing. I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself, but the images kept flashing through my mind. The face at the window, the twisted smile, the vial of dark liquid. I opened my eyes, and that's when I saw him. He was sitting at the other end of the bar, half hidden in the shadows. I hadn't noticed him before, but now it was impossible to ignore the way he was staring at me. His eyes were dark, almost black, and they bore into me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. He didn't move, didn't blink, just sat there, watching me. It was as if he knew something, something I didn't. And the longer I looked at him, the more I felt that he was somehow connected to all of this. I should have looked away, should have left the bar right then and there, but I couldn't. I was trapped in his gaze, like a rabbit caught in a predator's stare. My heart was racing, my palms sweaty, and I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. Finally, he moved. Slowly, deliberately, he got up from his seat and walked toward me. I wanted to run, to get the hell out of there, but my legs wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, my body betraying me as he approached. He stopped a few feet away, his eyes never leaving mine. Up close, I could see the scars on his face, the jagged lines that cut across his skin, telling stories of violence and pain. His presence was overwhelming, a dark cloud that seemed to suck the air out of the room. "You should have never made that deal," he said, his voice low and gravelly, like rocks grinding together. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Who are you?" He tilted his head slightly, a small, cruel smile playing on his lips. "Does it matter? What matters is what you've done." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my efforts to keep it steady. He leaned in closer, his face inches from mine, and I could feel the cold radiating off him, seeping into my bones. "You think you're just a buyer, but you're more than that. You've taken something that doesn't belong to you, and now it's going to take everything from you." I stared at him, my mind racing, trying to make sense of his words. "I don't understand. I didn't take anything. I just bought some crypto." "Is that what you think?" he interrupted, his voice dripping with disdain. "That this is just about money? No, it's about much more than that. You've opened a door that can't be closed, and now you'll have to face the consequences." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean?" He straightened up, his expression hardening. "It's already started. The face at your window, the package, the call, they were just the beginning. You're marked now, and there's no escape." Panic surged through me. "What do you want from me? How do I stop this?" His smile widened, but there was no warmth in it, only malice. "Stop? You don't stop this. You survive it, if you can." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me sitting there, trembling, my mind reeling with fear and confusion. I wanted to chase after him, to demand answers, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I could only watch as he disappeared into the shadows, leaving me alone in the dimly lit bar. I don't remember how long I sat there, staring into my empty glass, my mind a whirlwind of terror. Eventually, the bartender came over, asking if I was okay, but I didn't answer. I just got up, threw some money on the counter, and stumbled out into the night. The drive home was a blur, my thoughts consumed by the stranger's words. What had I done? What door had I opened? And more importantly, what was coming for me? When I got home, the house felt different, colder, darker, as if the very walls were closing in on me. I locked the door behind me, checking it twice, 3 times, but it did nothing to ease the growing sense of dread. The box and the vial were still on the kitchen table, untouched, but now they felt like a ticking time bomb, something I couldn't avoid any longer. I approached them slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to know. I needed to understand what was happening, even if the truth terrified me. I picked up the vial, holding it up to the light. The liquid inside was thick, almost syrupy, and it clung to the glass as if it had a mind of its own. I unscrewed the cap, my hands shaking, and took a cautious sniff. The smell hit me like a punch to the gut. Rotting flesh, decay, and something else. Something darker, more primal. I recoiled, nearly dropping the vial, but I forced myself to stay calm. There was a note in the box, another one, folded neatly beneath where the vial had been. I unfolded it, dreading what I might find. The handwriting was the same, but this note was shorter, more direct. "The blood of the damned, you've been chosen. Drink, and you'll see the truth." My blood ran cold. Drink it? The thought alone made me want to vomit. But at the same time, I couldn't deny the pull, the sick curiosity that gnawed at the edges of my mind. What truth? What would happen if I drank it? But I couldn't. I wouldn't. Whatever this was, it wasn't something I wanted any part of. I put the vial down, my hands still trembling, and backed away. I needed help, real help, not the useless police, not the indifferent strangers at the bar. I needed someone who understood what was happening, someone who could make sense of this nightmare. But where could I turn? Who could I trust? The answer eluded me, and as the night wore on, the weight of my situation pressed down on me, suffocating, inescapable. I ended up on the couch, clutching a bottle of whiskey, my eyes glued to the door, as if expecting it to burst open at any moment. The stranger's words echoed in my mind, a constant, maddening loop. You survive it, if you can, but how? How could I survive something I didn't understand, something that was beyond my control? As the hours ticked by, exhaustion finally overtook me, and I drifted into a fitful sleep, the vial still sitting on the table, its dark contents untouched. But even in sleep, there was no escape. My dreams were plagued by visions of the stranger, his cold, dead eyes watching me, judging me. I saw myself drinking the vial, the thick liquid coating my throat, filling my stomach with ice. I felt the darkness creeping in, taking hold, warping my mind, my soul. And then, just before I woke, I saw something else, something that made my blood run cold. A figure standing at the foot of my bed, watching me with those same hollow eyes. A figure that wasn't there when I fell asleep. I woke up with a start, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. I was alone in the room, but the feeling of being watched lingered, a suffocating presence that I couldn't shake. I knew then that the nightmare was far from over. It was just beginning, and I was trapped in it. The days that followed blurred together into a haze of fear and paranoia. I was constantly on edge, jumping at every sound, every flicker of movement in my peripheral vision. Sleep became a distant memory, something I could only dream of while awake. I'd close my eyes and immediately see those hollow, lifeless ones staring back at me. I knew I was spiraling, but I couldn't stop it. Whatever grip this thing had on me was tightening, and I was helpless to break free. The vial sat untouched on the kitchen table, the box beside it like a dark omen. Every time I walked by, I could feel it calling to me, a sickening pull in my gut that I fought with every ounce of strength I had left. I knew deep down that drinking it would change everything, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not yet. Not until I understood what was happening to me. But the answers weren't coming, and my isolation was only making things worse. The police had written me off as some paranoid freak. The stranger in the bar was gone, vanished into the night like a ghost. I had no one to turn to, no one to confide in. Every attempt to reach out for help ended the same way. Dismissal, disbelief, or worse. That patronizing look that told me they thought I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. The only thing that kept me going was the desperate hope that there was a way out of this nightmare, that if I could just figure out the right move, I could stop whatever was coming. But as the days dragged on, that hope grew dimmer, swallowed by the darkness that seemed to be closing in on me from all sides. And then, one night, the silence broke. I was sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the television, not really watching it, just trying to drown out the thoughts in my head. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch and twist, distorting the familiar shapes of the furniture into something grotesque. The air was thick, suffocating, as if the house itself was alive, breathing down my neck. That's when I heard it, a low, guttural whisper, coming from somewhere in the house. My blood ran cold, and I froze, straining to listen, hoping it was just my imagination. But there it was again, faint but unmistakable, a voice that wasn't mine, whispering words I couldn't quite make out. I turned off the TV, plunging the room into complete silence, and for a moment, the whispering stopped. But then it started again, louder this time, like it was moving closer. My heart was pounding in my chest, a wild, erratic rhythm that made it hard to think. I stood up, every instinct screaming at me to get out, but my legs felt like lead, rooted to the spot by some unseen force. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, until it filled the room, a chorus of voices, overlapping, merging into a cacophony of madness. I clamped my hands over my ears, trying to block it out, but it was useless. The sound wasn't just in the room, it was in my head, burrowing deep into my brain, a relentless assault on my sanity. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the whispering stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, an oppressive void that pressed down on me from all sides. I was gasping for breath, my body trembling with fear, but I forced myself to move, to do something, anything to break the spell. I stumbled toward the kitchen, needing to get away from the living room, from the place where those voices had taken hold. But as I entered the kitchen, I stopped dead in my tracks. The vial was gone. The wooden box was still there, sitting in the center of the table, like some kind of twisted centerpiece. But the vial that had haunted my every waking moment had vanished. My first thought was that I'd somehow knocked it over, that it had rolled off the table and shattered on the floor. But there was no sign of it. No broken glass, no dark stain. Nothing. It was just gone. Panic surged through me. Where could it have gone? Had someone taken it? But that was impossible. No one had been in the house. I'd made sure of that, checking and rechecking the locks every time I left, every time I returned. There was no way someone had gotten in, unless it wasn't a someone. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I backed away from the table, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. The vial couldn't have just disappeared. It had to be somewhere. It had to be. I turned the kitchen upside down, searching every cabinet, every drawer, every corner, but it was useless. The vial was gone, and with it, any hope I had of understanding what was happening to me. I was alone, completely and utterly alone, and the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. That's when the knock came. It was soft, almost tentative, like the person on the other side didn't really want to be there, but it echoed through the house like a gunshot, sending a jolt of fear through my entire body. I froze, my mind screaming at me not to answer it, not to let whatever was out there inside, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't just pretend it wasn't happening. The knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. My heart was in my throat as I crept toward the front door, every step feeling like a march toward my own execution. I reached the door, my hand hovering over the handle, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. Whoever was on the other side knocked a third time, and this time, I couldn't stop myself. I grabbed the handle and yanked the door open, my fear and curiosity battling for control. There was no one there. I stared out into the night, the cold air biting at my skin, but the porch was empty. No one was standing there. No one was hiding in the shadows. It was just me, alone, staring out into the darkness. And then I looked down. A package was sitting on the doorstep, a small, unassuming box wrapped in plain brown paper, just like the one before. My stomach churned, a wave of nausea rising up as I realized what it was. I didn't want to touch it, didn't want to bring it inside, but I knew I had no choice. Whatever this was, it wasn't going to leave me alone. I picked up the package, my hands trembling, and carried it into the house. I set it down on the kitchen table, right next to the empty wooden box, and for a long moment, I just stared at it, too afraid to open it. But I had to know. With a deep breath, I tore off the paper, revealing another wooden box, almost identical to the first. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely manage to open it. But when I did, I nearly dropped it in horror. Inside the box was a small glass vial, identical to the one that had disappeared. But this one wasn't empty. It was filled with the same dark, viscous liquid, swirling slowly inside the glass like some kind of living shadow. And next to it, nestled in the box, was another note. My hands were trembling as I unfolded it, my heart pounding in my chest. The elegant handwriting was the same, but the words were different, more ominous, more threatening. The time has come. Drink or suffer the consequences. My mind was reeling. What consequences? What would happen if I drank it? And more importantly, what would happen if I didn't? The terror was overwhelming, a black hole of fear that threatened to swallow me whole. But even as I stood there, paralyzed with indecision, I knew I was running out of time. Whatever this was, whatever I had been drawn into, it was coming to a head, and there was no way out. I sat down at the table, the vial in front of me, the note beside it. The house was silent, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall, each second a countdown to some inevitable horror. I knew I couldn't keep running, couldn't keep hiding. Whatever was coming for me, it wasn't going to stop until it got what it wanted. With a shaking hand, I picked up the vial, the glass cool and smooth against my skin. The liquid inside seemed to pulse with a life of its own, a dark and malevolent energy that sent a shiver down my spine. I stared at it, my mind a storm of fear and doubt. But deep down, I knew what I had to do. I unscrewed the cap, the smell hitting me immediately, a foul, rotting stench that made me gag. I held the vial up to the light, the liquid inside swirling, thick and ominous. My stomach churned, my body screaming at me to stop, to throw it away, to run. But I couldn't. There was no running from this. With a final, shaky breath, I brought the vial to my lips. The liquid was thick, almost syrupy, as it slid down my throat. The taste was beyond anything I could have imagined. Bitter, metallic, with an underlying rot that made me retch. But I forced it down, every drop, feeling it burn its way through my insides, like a poison, like a curse. When the vial was empty, I slammed it down on the table, gasping for breath, my body trembling with revulsion. I could feel it inside me, spreading, a cold, dark presence that seeped into every fiber of my being. And then the pain started. It was a sharp, searing agony, ripping through my stomach, my chest, my veins. I doubled over, clutching my sides, the pain so intense I thought I was going to die right there on the kitchen floor. My vision blurred, the edges of my world darkening, closing in, until all I could see was the blackness. All I could feel was the pain. But I didn't die. Not yet. Instead, the pain faded, leaving behind a cold, empty numbness that filled me with dread. I staggered to my feet, my legs weak, my head spinning, and stumbled toward the bathroom, needing to see, needing to know what was happening to me. I flipped on the light and stared at my reflection in the mirror. What I saw made my blood run cold. My skin was pale, almost translucent, like all the life had been drained out of me. My eyes were hollow, sunken into my skull, and my veins stood out against my skin, dark and twisted like black roots. But it was my face that terrified me the most. It was changing. My features were warping, shifting into something unrecognizable, something monstrous. My mouth stretched into a twisted grin, my teeth sharpening, growing, filling my mouth with jagged edges. My eyes darkened, the irises turning black, the whites stained with blood. I was becoming it. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. This was the consequence. This was the price I had to pay for opening that door, for making that deal. I wasn't just marked. I was being transformed, corrupted by the darkness that had been lurking in the shadows, waiting for its moment to strike. I stumbled back from the mirror, my heart racing, the terror overwhelming. I tried to scream, but the sound that came out wasn't human. It was a guttural, animalistic growl, a sound that sent a shiver of fear through my own soul. I didn't know how much time I had left before the transformation was complete, before I lost whatever was left of my humanity. But I knew one thing for certain. I was out of options. There was no more running, no more hiding. Whatever was coming, I had to face it head on, even if it meant losing everything, even if it meant becoming the very thing I feared. Because in the end, there was only one truth, one reality I couldn't escape. I should have never bought crypto from someone on the dark web. And now, it was too late to change that. The world was dissolving around me. My mind teetered on the edge of sanity, the boundaries between reality and nightmare blurring into a twisted tapestry of horror. The face staring back at me from the bathroom mirror was no longer my own, but something dark, something monstrous that wore my skin like a mask. I could feel it clawing at the edges of my consciousness, an invasive presence that sought to consume everything I was, everything I had been. But I couldn't let it. Not yet. The transformation was accelerating, the changes in my body more pronounced, more grotesque with each passing second. My skin had taken on a sickly grayish hue, stretched thin over the bones that jutted out at unnatural angles. My eyes, God, my eyes, were black pits, devoid of any life, any humanity. I could feel the darkness inside me, pulsing with a malevolent energy, growing stronger with every beat of my heart. I stumbled out of the bathroom, my movements jerky and uncoordinated, like a puppet on strings. The house felt alien, unfamiliar, as if I had crossed some invisible threshold into another realm, a place where the rules of reality no longer applied. The walls seemed to close in on me, the shadows stretching, twisting into grotesque shapes that writhed and pulsed like living things. But even in my deteriorating state, I knew I had to act. I couldn't let the darkness take me. Not completely. There was one last thing I could do, one last desperate attempt to break free of this nightmare, to stop whatever I was becoming. The vial. My mind clung to that one thought, that one glimmer of hope, as I staggered toward the kitchen. The empty glass vial still sat on the table, a dark and ominous reminder of the choice I had made. But it wasn't the vial itself that drew me. It was the note that had come with it, the words that had seared themselves into my mind, the blood of the damned. You've been chosen. Drink, and you'll see the truth. The truth. That was what I needed. That was the key to understanding all of this, to finding a way out. But the truth, I realized, wasn't something that could be given. It had to be taken, wrested from the darkness that had claimed me. And I knew exactly where to start. The dark web. The place where this nightmare had begun. It was my only lead, my only connection to the forces that were tearing my life apart. If there were answers to be found, they were there, lurking in the hidden corners of the internet, waiting for me to discover them. I grabbed my laptop, my hands trembling so badly I could barely type. The screen flickered to life, casting a pale glow over the darkened room, and I navigated to the hidden browser I had used before, the gateway to the dark web. My breath came in ragged gasps, my heart pounding in my chest, as I delved back into the shadows, back to the place where it had all started. The marketplace where I'd first encountered Crypt God was still there, as ominous and foreboding as ever. But this time, I wasn't looking to buy. I was looking for something far more dangerous. I navigated through the pages, past the illegal goods and services, the black market drugs, the weapons, until I found it. The forum. It was a hidden sub-forum, buried deep within the marketplace, a place where only the most twisted and depraved souls dared to tread. The threads were filled with cryptic messages, dark rituals, and unspeakable acts, things that made my stomach churn, even in my altered state. But I wasn't there to gawk at the horrors. I was there to find the truth. And then I saw it. A thread titled, "The Price of Power, the Blood Contract." My heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the connection I'd been looking for. With shaking hands, I clicked on the thread, and what I found inside made my blood run cold. The thread was a detailed account of a dark ritual, a contract with forces beyond comprehension. It spoke of power, wealth, and influence, but at a terrible cost. The sacrifice of one's humanity, the corruption of one's soul. The ritual involved the consumption of a special substance, a vial of dark liquid, referred to only as the blood of the damned, my blood. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. That's what I had ingested. That's what was coursing through my veins, twisting me into this abomination. The thread went on to describe the effects of the blood, how it would grant unimaginable power, but at the cost of one's soul, transforming the drinker into a vessel for something ancient, something evil. But there was more, a way out, buried deep within the arcane language of the post, hidden among the descriptions of the ritual's effects. A single sentence that offered a glimmer of hope. The contract can be broken by returning the blood to its source, through the sacrifice of the one who initiated the pact. I stared at the words, my mind reeling. The source. The one who had initiated the pact. There was only one person that could be Crypt God, the vendor who had sold me the cursed vial, who had drawn me into this nightmare. But how was I supposed to find him? The dark web was vast, a labyrinth of hidden paths and dead ends, and Crypt God was just a screen name, a mask that could be worn by anyone. I was running out of time, the darkness inside me growing stronger, more insistent. With each passing moment, I could feel it gnawing at the edges of my mind, whispering promises of power, of release, if I would only give in. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. I had one last option, one last desperate gamble. The thread had been posted by someone, a user named Seeker. If I could find them, maybe they could help me, show me how to break the contract, how to undo what had been done to me. It was a long shot, but it was all I had left. I sent a message to Seeker, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type. I didn't have time for subtlety, for caution. I told them everything. About the vial, the transformation, the stranger at the bar, and the dark forces that were closing in on me. I begged them for help, for anything that could save me from this nightmare, and then I waited. The minutes ticked by, each one an eternity as I stared at the screen, willing it to light up with a reply. The darkness inside me was growing stronger, more insistent, whispering in a language I couldn't understand, promising me an end to the pain, to the fear, if I would just surrender. I was on the verge of giving up, of letting the darkness take me, when the screen flickered to life. A reply. My heart raced as I clicked on the message, my breath catching in my throat as I read the words. Meet me. You have one chance. Midnight. Abandoned church on the outskirts. Come alone. There was no signature, no other information. Just a location and a time. Midnight. I glanced at the clock. It was already past 11. I didn't have much time, but I didn't need time. I needed answers. I grabbed my keys, the message still fresh in my mind, and bolted out the door. The drive to the church was a blur, my thoughts racing, my heart pounding as I sped down the dark, empty roads. The darkness inside me was growing stronger, feeding on my fear, on my desperation. But I pushed it down, forcing myself to focus on the task at hand. When I finally arrived at the church, the building loomed out of the darkness like a forgotten relic, its once grand facade crumbling and overgrown with vines. The windows were shattered, the doors hanging off their hinges, the air thick with the scent of decay. It was a place that had been abandoned by the world, a place where the shadows held sway. I parked the car and stepped out, my breath visible in the cold night air. The silence was oppressive. The only sound, the crunch of gravel under my feet as I approached the entrance. The door creaked loudly as I pushed it open, the sound echoing through the empty nave, sending a shiver down my spine. Inside, the church was even more decrepit, the pews rotting, the walls stained with mold and time. The altar at the far end was covered in dust, the cross above it hanging at an angle, as if it too had given up. But I wasn't alone. A figure stood in the center of the nave, cloaked in shadow, their face hidden beneath a hood. My heart skipped a beat as I realized this must be Seeker, the one who had offered me a way out. I approached cautiously, every instinct screaming at me to turn back, to run, but I couldn't. This was my only chance, my last hope. "Are you Seeker?" I asked, my voice trembling. The figure didn't move, didn't speak for a long moment, and when they finally did, their voice was low, almost a whisper, but filled with a quiet authority that made my skin crawl. "I am," they said. "You've come for the truth." I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. The darkness inside me surged, angry, impatient, but I forced it down, clinging to the hope that this person, this stranger, could save me. "You're running out of time," Seeker continued, stepping forward. Their face was still hidden, but I could feel their eyes on me, piercing, judging. "The blood is nearly complete. Once it takes hold, there will be no going back." "I don't want this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know what I was getting into. I just wanted to buy some crypto, that's all. Seeker laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that echoed through the empty church. "The dark web is not a place for the naive. You opened a door, and now you must pay the price." I felt a surge of anger, of frustration, boiling up inside me. "There has to be a way out. You said the contract could be broken. Tell me how." Seeker was silent for a long moment, and I could feel the darkness inside me growing stronger, more insistent. I was running out of time. If they didn't help me soon, it would be too late. Finally, Seeker spoke. "There is a way, but it comes at a cost." "Anything," I said desperately. "I'll do anything." Seeker nodded slowly. "The one who initiated the pact, the one who sold you the blood, must be sacrificed. Only then can the contract be broken." My heart sank. "Crypt God," I muttered. "But I don't even know who he is. How am I supposed to find him?" Seeker stepped closer, their voice lowering to a whisper. "You won't have to. He's been watching you, waiting. He'll come for you soon enough." The words sent a shiver down my spine. Crypt God had been watching me? All this time, he had been waiting for the transformation to be complete, for me to become the vessel he needed. And now, he was coming to claim what was his. "How do I stop him?" I asked, my voice trembling. Seeker reached into their cloak and pulled out a small ornate dagger, its blade gleaming in the dim light. "When he comes, you must kill him. Only his blood can break the pact, can free you from the darkness." I stared at the dagger, the weight of it heavy in my hand, as Seeker placed it there. The blade was cold, the metal biting into my skin as I gripped it tightly. This was it, my only chance to escape the nightmare that had consumed my life. But as I looked up, Seeker was gone. The church was empty, the silence pressing in from all sides. I was alone, with only the dagger and the knowledge of what I had to do. I didn't know how much time I had, but I knew it wasn't much. Crypt God was coming, and when he did, I would be ready. I returned home, the dagger tucked into my jacket, my heart pounding with fear and anticipation. The darkness inside me was growing stronger, more aggressive, as if it knew what was coming. I could feel it gnawing at the edges of my mind, whispering in that twisted language, urging me to give in, to embrace the power it offered. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. I waited in the darkness, the house silent around me, the minutes ticking by with agonizing slowness. Every sound, every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside sent a jolt of fear through me. I knew he was coming, but I didn't know when or how. And then I heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible knock at the door. My heart stopped. I knew, without a doubt, that it was him. Crypt God. The one who had started all of this, who had drawn me into this nightmare. And now, he was here to finish it. I stood up, the dagger clutched tightly in my hand, and made my way to the door. My breath was coming in short, ragged gasps, my hands trembling with fear and adrenaline. This was it, the moment of truth. If I failed, I would lose everything. My humanity, my soul, my life. But if I succeeded, I reached the door, my heart pounding in my chest, and hesitated for a moment, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts, 1,000 doubts. But there was no turning back. I had come too far, sacrificed too much. I opened the door. Crypt God stood on the other side, his face hidden in shadow, his presence a dark and malevolent force that seemed to suck the air out of the room. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, watching me with those hollow, lifeless eyes. For a moment, I was paralyzed with fear, the darkness inside me surging, trying to take control. But I fought it down, clinging to the last shred of my humanity, the last hope of salvation. And then I struck. The dagger plunged into his chest, the blade sinking deep into his flesh. Crypt God didn't scream, didn't even react, just looked down at the wound with a curious detachment, as if it were happening to someone else. The darkness inside me recoiled, a violent surge of anger and fear, as if it knew that its time was running out. But Crypt God wasn't done. He reached out, his hand cold and clammy, and grabbed my wrist, forcing me to look into his eyes. They were black, empty, but I could see something there, a spark, a flicker of something ancient, something evil. And then he spoke, his voice a low, guttural growl that sent a shiver of terror down my spine. "You think you can escape this?" he hissed. "You think you can break the contract? You are already mine." The words hit me like a physical blow, the darkness inside me surging, trying to take control, to finish what had been started. But I fought back, gritting my teeth, forcing the blade deeper into his chest, twisting it with all the strength I had left. "No," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'm not yours, not anymore." Crypt God's eyes widened, just a fraction, as if he hadn't expected me to resist. And then slowly, the light began to fade from his eyes, the grip on my wrist weakening until finally, he collapsed to the floor, the dagger still buried in his chest. I stood there, gasping for breath, my entire body trembling with exhaustion and fear. The darkness inside me was screaming, raging, but I could feel it weakening, losing its grip on my mind, on my soul. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it was over. The darkness was gone. I fell to my knees, the weight of everything crashing down on me all at once. I had done it. I had broken the contract, freed myself from the nightmare that had consumed my life. But the cost was more than I could bear. Crypt God lay dead at my feet, the dagger still in his chest, the lifeless eyes staring up at me, as if accusing me of something I couldn't understand. I had won, but at what price? My soul? My humanity? I didn't know, and I didn't care. I was free. But as I sat there, the silence pressing in from all sides, a new thought crept into my mind, one that filled me with a deep, cold dread. I had killed Crypt God. I had broken the contract. But I hadn't destroyed the darkness. It was still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next fool to stumble into its grasp. And as I stared down at the dagger, slick with blood, I knew that the darkness wasn't gone. It was inside me. It would always be inside me. And no matter how far I ran, no matter how hard I tried to escape, it would find me again. Because in the end, there was only one truth, one reality I couldn't escape. I should have never bought crypto from someone on the dark web. And now, I would pay the price. Forever.